Bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio. For the masses. Yeah, and how you doing? How you doing? Today's Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. 43 days into the new year, just 327 days left. As always, we are live. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south. Far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the planet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Yeah. What is cracking? How you doing? All right. Very, very special night on the show tonight because we have James Redfield here, author of the Celestine Prophecy. That's right. And you know, well, let me get through this really quick. Tomorrow night is Fader Night with open lines all night long. Looking forward to that. Lots to discuss tomorrow night, and we'll get to all of that. And take your calls all night long. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. The Sandbox is hashtag F2B on Twitter. Any questions or comments for myself or James tonight, use hashtag F2BQ. You can also email throughout the show, Jimmy at JimmyChurchRadio.com. And it goes without saying that in the middle of the 1990s, 95, 96. You know, it was a fun time. It was a good time. It was a strange time. And then Celestine Prophecy took over. And I was just like the rest of all of you, and what seems like the rest of the planet. We all got the book, we read it, and we talked about it. I got the book. I sat with people in my office in Culver City, talked about the book all day long. You know, and some people were going through the book in stages for the first time, discussing it. Some had finished it and were reading it a second or third time. I was flying around the country, around the world on business. Everywhere I went, you saw the book. You saw it. It was just everywhere. And the impact cannot be measured. But to go 25 years into the future to tonight, when I am able to sit down with James Redfield and have a conversation with all of you, that is truly special, and I am looking forward to this. It's going to be it's going to be a great conversation. Been looking forward to it. So somebody pinch me. I'm quite happy. Now, and there's another part to this, too, as well. Fortunately, I have met James and spoken to him a few times over the years, and we did have a couple of really good conversations over this past weekend. So I'm not quite as I'll be able to maintain. Oh, man. But it's going to be a great conference. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And we've been planning this for a few years, oddly enough. So, and I won't mention this with James tonight, so I'll share this with you now. So we're standing there talking. We're with a couple of friends. And, Danny and Brinkley was standing there. And James goes, okay, man, let's exchange numbers. I said, great, that's what cell phones are for. And I give him my number, and he goes, oh, I've already got it. And then I check my... and I go, now what's the excuse? And it was just so funny that we were both standing there, and Danny just cracked up, and he goes, man, you too. You too. Okay, so anyway, James grew up in a rural area of Birmingham, Alabama, and is the author of the Celestine Prophecy, a book that remained on the New York Times bestseller list for 165 weeks. That is 3 years to you and I. Sold over 5 million copies and has been translated into 34 languages. While majoring in sociology at Auburn University, he studied Eastern philosophies, including Taoism and Zen. He later received a master's degree in counseling and spent more than 15 years as a therapist to abused adolescents. In 1989, he quit. He quit his job to write full-time about interactive psychology, Eastern and Western philosophy, science, futurism, ecology, and history. In October 1997, he was awarded the Medal of the Presidency of the Italian Senate. And in the spring of 2000, he received the Humanitarian of the Year honors from Auburn University. 2 months later, he was honored by the International New Thought Alliance with another Humanitarian of the Year award. In March 2004, he was honored by the Wisdom Media Group with the World View Award. And right now, James is engaged in a worldwide Celestine Prophecy inspiration tour, and his website's right there at jimmychurchradio.com. Click on it, CelestineVision.com. I would like to welcome to Fade to Black, James Redfield. James, good evening. How are you?
Good, Jimmy. Glad to be with you.
It's great to have you here. And before we kick things off, and I can honestly say, finally, James, you're with us, right? But before we kick things off, you get the first-time guest disclaimer. And it is this. It's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're going to end as friends. There you go. Oh, man.
Listen, I have a question right off for you.
Sure.
Where'd you find that bio information? I thought I scrubbed all that off the internet.
And you know what's interesting, James, before we get started here, your influence on all of us, when I say all of us, our community, but it certainly goes beyond that. But you go and you look into what you should have achieved. You did achieve all of that, and absolutely, I was going to mention it because I want to say the emotional connection. You resonated with us. Those things need to be recognized, and they certainly have been. So thank you for everything.
Well, you're quite welcome. It's been quite a journey, and I've enjoyed most of it. And it's still going. I mean, we always talk about it. It's a new time in the world, and how could you not be excited about that? Yeah,
and going back to your comment, I think that is a genuine statement. What James is referring to, everybody. I requested a short bio from James, and he sent me a nice, short, to-the-point bio. And I expanded on that just a little bit. and that's what he's referring to. And absolutely, James, I was going to go there. Next time around, it'll be your short bio that you send me. How's that?
No, I'm just kidding about all that. I came from nowhere like you did, and everybody else that I know who's really made a contribution to, what we globally call consciousness. And it's fun, and it's something that everybody can tune into, and it's getting clearer and clearer what we're doing, and really how to tune in and have this, this greater life that we poke around and talk about all the time.
We had, I want to take a couple steps backward here for the audience. You and I had a private conversation over the weekend. And I want to go back and visit one of the questions that I asked you privately, if you don't mind. But let's go back there for a second, because I asked you then, I'm just going to repeat and paraphrase just a little bit, but I asked you if you were prepared for what eventually happened, because when it happened fast, and it happened big. It happened globally. Were you ready for that? And I don't think anybody really is. No. Yeah, take me back to the...
I was a little older when it happened. I'm glad I wasn't like 18 or 22 or something, like a lot of, say, athletic stars get thrown on the scene do. But I was prepared to deliver the message. I wasn't prepared for the media hype, and back then it was a slightly different world. A lot of books besides the Celestine Prophecy has mellowed out the conversation about spirituality and consciousness.
Right.
But back then, there were a lot of religious institutions that stood guard against that conversation, and so it was interesting that I was able to navigate that. But what my strategy was is I just let the book speak for itself. So I didn't seek the limelight. Tony Robbins tried to train me in what he does and get wild on stage, and I never did that because I think that I wanted the book to just make its journey, and how the book was created, that's a whole different story. But when it went, most people know it went viral. It started off with me doing publicity on a self-published edition. And it went so viral that I finally turned it over to a big publisher, and who got it out there in all these countries. But it was already being passed around to different countries just by word of mouth. And there's a reason for that. But as that pushed forward, it just snowballed and wound up being, for 2 years, it was the best-selling book in the world.
And what is interesting, if I may jump in, back then I was hearing the chatter, right? I was hearing about this book, and it seemed like everybody was talking about it. So I went down to Borders Books right across the street from the house, and I walked in, and it said, Celestine Prophecy, do you guys have it? And the guy looked at me like I was nuts, right? And he points over. He goes, "It's right there." And they had like a Christmas tree display, right? I don't know, 500, copies of it stacked up. And I enjoyed this guy's laughter at that point, being so naive. Went over, picked up the book, and got it. But it seemed that, and this is what I think is most interesting, I read the book in a week, probably 3 or 4 times. It was an easy, fun read, right? So you just plow through it, flip it over, and start over. And what I found that, whether I was at work or traveling the country, I was speaking across the United States, the conversations were there. but it was different types of people, right? It wasn't necessarily a spiritual seeker, or, you had religious or atheist, everybody was reading the book and getting something different from it. I almost felt like we weren't reading the same book, which was great, because I would converse and get their take on it too as well. Did you find that was ultimately the end result, where everybody got their own individual taste of it?
I think that it carried the reader through 9 insights that once grasped would lead to a totally conscious planet. So that's a people with every motivation, wants to see, well, how would that help me? I don't know that I believe that or anything could create that, but what is this? And because it's a story, it's a novel, it's a adventure story. It just takes the reader step by step through what I would call now, that steps into what we know is a very practical, active consciousness about how our lives can go forward, and we can live our most secret ambitions. That all can happen, and there's a part of the universe that is still basically hidden, that is ready to act and help, and for these dreams. Now, you can't be too controlling about it. You have to, as you have to allow your intuition to guide you. But it's once you discover that flow, then you begin to see it kind of everywhere. And I think that's why people start talking about it with each other. How do we get this flow in life? Is it really designed into the quantum physics of this universe? And I would say, yeah, it really is. But we first of all have to be open to it, and second of all, we have to just change our reaction patterns in the way we live our lives. And it's as simple as that, and as hard as that.
Now, when you write something like this with this kind of impact, did you find people were approaching you with they were expecting you to be like the Dalai Lama, right? You know what I mean? So, a spiritual guide and entity, and they were. But I've met you, right? You're
right.
Just James Redfield. But was there this kind of expectation that you found yourself in, and a certain responsibility?
Well, I certainly wanted to be clear about the book, and I was determined to, I had, speaking engagements from the very beginning. But what I tried to do is reflect all that energy. James has all the answers back on the audience.
Right.
And I learned how to do that so that when I got the questions, I would just say, well, what's your intuitive answer to that question? So that's the way I avoided being, overwhelmed by expectation. And it was also my opinion then that this book needed to just permeate the world. I mean, it didn't need to touch people's consciousness in the way the book turned out to be able to do. And
can I ask you? Really?
I backed away from any kind of teaching modality or anything else. I haven't done that until just recently.
Right.
It's a new time in the world.
Did it ultimately work for you?
Well, I got a lot of during the first tour with the book, I got a lot of sort of negative reactions from the spiritual community, but not what you might think, because, and again, there's nothing in the book that really challenges anybody's religious beliefs. It's about how do we apply whatever this is we think we're opening up to, and how do we make it work in our lives. So, the whole time I tried to be less of a media figure and just keep writing the books. And as you know, I've written 4 in the series. So that was my game plan. Although now, because of what I think is happening out there, I'm much more active as a teacher.
There is just a couple of more questions about the old days, and then we're going to move on to today.
All right.
But because this is the first time that you've been on the show with us, and it's my first opportunity to ask these questions, and certainly the next time you're on the show, we're going to be in a whole...
How it arrived to me is a pretty interesting story. So,
and you mentioned novel earlier, and you did try to drive that home back then. But as I read it, and so many others, but I read it as a novel. But it seemed to me that this book was you and your experiences, and that you went to Peru, and that you found this cave, and you discovered these things. How much of it is part of your, a nonfiction setting?
I would say now quite a bit. It was pretty mystical going there, for one thing, but it was also a combination of experiences, in Sedona, Arizona, and some other places.
Right.
So it's certainly a novel about my experience and the experiences that I've witnessed in others. Because the reality of it, what I really wanted to drive home was this is that consciousness is something that we all have access to, and it's mainly a matter of not doing rather than doing. You can't beat the door down. You have to open the door and walk through it, but you can't just beat the door down. So it's my feeling about it back then was that what I was writing was a set of experiences that the whole world was opening up to, and that were, for the most part, at least the first 9 of these insights, but I now call abilities, but the abilities of consciousness. But, I wrote that first book knowing full well that people had achieved the states that I was describing in that book, and it was in the world, and it was just a matter of people finding their own track into it, and that happens, as you know, in a variety of ways.
Well, and here we are today in 2020, and the book is probably, James, more important today than it was in 1996, right? We need this book. Yeah. And let's stay right there. In 1995, 1996, we were in the midst of big change. The internet, technology, things were happening around us, and the world was moving very, very quickly. And now here in 2020, instead of being brought together, we're more divided today. Consciousness is confused, right?
Well, I wouldn't agree with that completely. I think what's confused is the secular world, and at the level of consciousness, that's operating beneath that. I mean, I know we all get caught up in politics or something like that, and it makes us, what's happening, the divisions we see, that makes us sad and wondering why we're going backwards maybe or something like that.
Right.
But the fact is, there's more consciousness at the base level among people who seek consciousness than there's ever been before. There's more meditation in the world than there's never been before. There is more seeking of consciousness and steps into consciousness than ever before. And the most important thing about what's happening now is that we have two new generations coming online suddenly asking the big questions. And that is amplifying this whole search for wisdom and meaning in life and all the rest.
For you, when everybody has a family and an upbringing and a belief system that is shown to us, as we grow up, but at some point we rebel, right? I don't know about the world as I was taught. It feels a little bit different to me. And I'm sure you went through the exact same thing. Do you remember the moment where you started to look at the world with squinty eyes, right, and starting to question things?
Absolutely. I grew up in a fairly rural area. My father was, in Alabama, and my father was from California. We were right in the middle in Birmingham. We were right in the middle of the civil rights movement. And as a child, as barely a teenager, not even a teenager, I was, I got as close to the fire hoses as I could.
Right.
Because I could not understand it, right? And my dad was on the right side of that issue, which meant I could really not understand it. And but what happened was, that was probably the wake-up call. The world is bigger than, this wherever we grew. Even in a big city, it's still bigger than we thought. And but my mother was also into, she was into the early writings of the sort of alternative spiritualists, and she followed psychics like Arthur Ford and Edgar Cayce and that sort of thing. So I suddenly went in that route. We grew up, very. The Methodist Church that she took me to was a great kind of brooding ground for asking questions, because the people there, they were basically Christian, but not conservative Christian so much as a kind of lived Christianity. So they had tapped into a consciousness that I noticed, and but they didn't know how to talk about it, and that's been the problem all through the 20th century. We didn't know how to talk about it. And what the important parts were. We know we could tap into this kind of blissful state and something like intuitive guidance or intuitive intelligence developed. And, I saw all that happening in people, and they were cool. They faced death being cool.
Right,
they were,
right.
They had something, And so, but they didn't know how to talk to me about it, so I had to get out of there, and they practically kicked me out and said, go to college because you're asking too many questions. And that's exactly what I did, and then just dug into what I didn't realize was the human potential movement. And, that started with Carl Jung. That's just a name to a lot of people out there, but famous psychologist who was a protege of Freud and broke and took psychoanalysis, which really means thinking deeply about what's going on in your life,
right?
How the past affected you, to the spiritual level. he interjected the idea of archetypes. And not to get too deep in the weeds, but we all have a part of our brain and soul is wired to wake up and to move into this kind of consciousness and flow, and when it happens, we know it, and I think we know how to just start from scratch and enter that for the first time in forever. I think the human potential movement is reaching a crescendo of consensus about how to move into these mystical states that can energize our lives in a very positive way.
Was there a Zen? We've got about 3 minutes before the break. Was there a little Zen community in 1975 Birmingham for you to hang out with? Were you reading like Carlos Castaneda and Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance? You know, how did you?
Well, when I was, I moved out and headed to college and went to Auburn. And Auburn, like every other college at that time, had people following the human potential movement. And they were talking about Eastern meditation, Eastern thought, and how does that affect daily life, and all those questions that were going on. And yeah, there were meditative Zen. I mean, this is the heart of the South.
Right. And
they were already, the human potential movement started in San Francisco, really, at F1. And in a big way in the United States. So that's where it all started. But, I could order it from Auburn. I could order all the books that about, of what they were doing at the Stanford Research Institute and get them shipped right to the Auburn Library. And that's exactly what I did. So it was a time when this crescendo was already happening in academia, and among the kids that were also rebelling against the Vietnam War.
How was it, we've got 60 seconds before the break, for you to finally have this information and friendships, with your student friends at Auburn? How freeing was it for you? Were you just out of control with consuming all of this? I can imagine it must have been very freeing.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. We were still only looking at it from the mental theoretical point of view, though. We haven't really had, this kind of what we'd call now heart opening, moment of peak experience. We didn't have any of those in the sense that we would talk about it now. But we were interested. We knew that we were on to an idea, and that that was somehow our birthright, and we were all chasing that. Certainly, everybody in our circle,
It must have been amazing. It just only because, and especially at that age, we're confused. We don't know we're confused, right? Let's take a break right here. Our guest tonight, James Redfield. This is going to be a great conversation. You stay right there. Author of the Celestine Prophecy. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. It's going to be great. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. You can follow James on Twitter. We've got his links up right there. It's James_Redfield. We'll be right back. Stay with us. All right, I'm back. I just... that was me. I literally bumped our audio rack and stopped the commercial playback. So that's it. We just came back from commercial just like that. And James, you got to love live radio, right?
Right.
That was just too funny. I was just goofing around and I spun my chair and my knee hit the stop button on the rack of gear. I was like, what happened? Okay, all right. And if that fires back up, let me mute this. Okay. One of the questions, James, that I have for so many guests, and I've done almost 2,000 interviews over the years. That's a lot. And I've gotten nearly a different answer to this question every time. I can't wait to hear your answer, which is, what is consciousness? What's your definition?
It's and this will sound a little convoluted, but it's being aware of more and more around you. Okay, so and what that means is, and at the top of this opening is an awareness that the mystics talk about, which is a perception of the universe and all that's behind the universe and included in the universe from a perceptual point of view. Now, I don't think, we're the thing about planet Earth is that we're going together. We're making progress together because we're all clairvoyant to each other, which means there's just really one mind, that we share with everybody. And healing of the earth, of culture, is all about opening up to a little more, opening up to that unification we have with everybody, and agreeing on more and more things. That's really, in my view, what we're here on the planet for, is to unify and agree on two things. One, what is our spiritual nature? And where are we going with that? And people from every direction would say, well, we're going back home. Okay, well, right now we're not going anywhere. It feels like we're going in circles too much, right? But again, I believe that fear, and I call it darkness. The darkness is separating, and the unification, the high-speed evolution of the planet is happening among the people that are generating that. So that's a long answer, but it means we're becoming more and more aware, not just of that we're here, from a spiritual point of view, not knowing why, and we're systematically learning more and more and agreeing on the nature of our spirituality. And then we're unifying around that, and that's the game. That's the master game for humanity since the very beginning.
Well, the answer to those two questions are infinite, right? Once you get and as you explore, certainly those two questions are so fundamental. Absolutely.
Well, they're built in. Yeah, they're built into our souls, right? Because we know that's the game, and we're trying to unify at the same time we argue about what is our spiritual nature, but we have evidence. We're generating evidence experientially that we can agree on more and more as to how we can become more conscious spiritually.
Is there
I think we almost have the operation manual down for planet Earth.
We're getting close. I agree, but we may not have the answers for another 1,000 years. But
well, I'm not sure how long it'll take.
Right. Then there's the other fundamental, which is, what is the progenitor of consciousness? Where does it start? Or is that in and of itself infinite?
Well, we all, while the consciousness itself has its source within, right?
Right.
And so that's where it all starts. It's suddenly being aware that you are living a life at a higher level, and and start to realize that you can live the hard way or the easy way, and that there's a big consensus coming out of the human potential movement, and that movement's important to know about because the human potential movement started with Carl Jung, as I mentioned, but it has progressed for 100 years. It's 100 years old, and we know that we have come to a clarity about certain aspects of this consciousness and how to grow in consciousness or open up more to consciousness, but also to energize certain impulses and goals that we seem to come here with to help humanity evolve. And so anyway, I think we're reaching a clarity about that.
Why is it, you just mentioned one of the most brilliant statements that you can make, which is we've got two choices, the hard road or the easy road, right? Or, the good or the bad. Why is it that doing the wrong thing is so easy, right? Why,
because it seems the safest path, It seems safe. You can, if you're a taker, you can, it seems like you're taking care of your security by taking from others, right? And that's how you rationalize it. There's no meaning to the world. The whole secular atheist sort of mantle is, you can invent and do whatever you want to because there's no meaning to the world. We're all accidents of the universe, of evolution, or all the things they say.
Right.
And it's safe, because we're without consciousness, spiritual consciousness. What we are is just people run around trying to get the best we can with our egos in life. And as you say, that's the hard way.
And I can tell you the most spiritual person on this planet is a physicist, atheist, when the plane is about to crash.
That's right.
I guarantee it. More spiritual than you and I combined at that moment. And this is what I find really interesting is that, and you just mentioned this a minute ago, in that we are closer to finding these answers, and so is science. They are pushing all of those atheist scientists, physicists that are out there trying to figure out at the quantum level what is going on. They are starting to find out that consciousness is a problem for them, because that's an issue that is out there that they and science and consciousness and spirituality now are starting to overlap, and they don't like that. They don't. And once that blows out, then their belief system collapses, in that there is nothing, there's no ghost, there's no life after death, there is no spirituality, there is no conscious. But they're going to find out that there is, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much evidence from the near-death experience research that we're basically spiritual entities in this world, trying to keep our energy field from, getting sick, because of the way we treat this energy field that we call our body, So there's a big wake-up call happening everywhere, and so the dark side is very, very, this materialist, hanging on to this materialism. There's nothing but material, nothing but the things we can have fun with, or, the relationships we have, and that's all there is. And they don't want to think about what happens in the afterlife. In fact, the humanity was almost totally closed off. We had all these religious pictures of people flying, floating on clouds and playing harps, as that's heaven, right? But really, they didn't want to know. They didn't even want to bring up the question. So that's why people leave their relatives in the nursing home and never visit because they don't want to be reminded that they're going to get old. It's a denial of death. So many books that have really penetrated our consciousness, and mainly the near-death experience research that really woke us up. And I called that, that this was my second book, and it came long after the first 9 insights, because what I was doing is trying to, as I mentioned, I was trying to chronicle these steps in human evolution that felt like insights that were changing everybody. And the first 9 I knew were already out there, but I had my publisher saying, "Well, look, you got to write another book. Write the 10th insight." And I'd say, "Well, I don't even know if there is a 10th insight. The only ones I know about is the 9th. This steps in awakeness, right?" But soon I realized, with all the near-death experience, we were having another revelation in human thought and human understanding. And that's when we finally realized that all this religious talk about heaven was a real place that we come from and go back to. There's tons of research looking at these testimonies of people who've died and come back. And, it's very persuasive on what the process is when we come over, and really, thanks to Daniel Brinkley, what the process is going back the other way.
The ideas of quantum entanglement, quantum physics, the things that happen in that world of science, and I'm talking about the multiverse and parallel worlds, and of course entanglement. Right. All of this suggests the near-death experience, right? Interdimensionality of us, and if they are going to say, because of string theory, that there is another 7 dimensions beyond the 3 or 4 that we live in. If they want to suggest all of this, then that is heaven, right? Or another dimension and another world and consciousness and beings that are living in those worlds. You can't have one without the other, can you?
Well, it's I don't know that they've tied it together. I don't think they have the mathematics of a dimension we can actually large enough to really walk around in. But I think that the concept is out.
That's
and
right.
That gives more validity to all our traditions that say, there's some kind of afterlife, and we are spiritual beings, and we come here and we go back, and we leave our body here, but our astral body goes with us. And that's essentially who we are.
Is consciousness electric? Is there a tangible side of consciousness? Is it measurable?
Well, they've done some experiments weighing people while they're still alive on their deathbed, and just after they pass. And the soul essentially leaves, and they're lighter by a valid amount. So I don't know. That gets into the weeds of. We've got a lot of physicists out there. We have a lot of mathematicians. They want to find a mathematical formula for it all. And there are some people out there trying. And when that happens, we'll have a new physics that I think, as you suggest, that's multidimensional.
I can't wait for that. I want. There's a part of me, James, that I not in a negative sense, but I need some folks out there to eat crow.
Well. They're already eating a good bit, just because we understand it psychologically, and physicists don't really recognize any other science but their own. But the psychological validation, but just because of the key experiences of spiritual consciousness can be validated. It's easier now, as I've said, than ever before in consciousness to validate the chief experiences that give us evidence of that we're spiritual. We have a consciousness. We're living in a universe that's designed for us to pop into consciousness and to virtually live miracle kinds of lives. And for the most part, not enough people have lived this way. But I'm saying openly that we know how to open up to this level of life, and that there's a karmic design to the universe. And for the first time, we're actually trying to get into alignment with that karmic design, and then that's when everything changes.
How did we so quickly, James, even since the release of the Celestine Prophecy back in 95, 96, how did we become so unraveled so quickly?
Well, it just, it's what's unraveled is the materialistic paradigm, right?
Right.
Everybody, when religion of various kinds was most dominant in the latter 20th century, most dominant, especially in the United States.
Right.
It was mental. It was all mental, right? So whenever the 60s did happen. There were a lot of drugs, and there were a lot of encounter groups, and with the baby boomers, there really started to be this experience of heart openings, the experience to finding those traumas in childhood and get rid of them. All that started, and because it was experientially spiritual
mm-hmm.
and conscious, it started to unravel the religious doctrines and the religious paradigm that ran the world. So that was a bit the unraveling. Now, what's unraveling is this materialistic paradigm. That it's still going, but it's now the dark side. They're having a fight to keep it in this rush of new consciousness. They fight. They invent things like they never worried about immortality until we started believing in this life beyond death. And then they had to figure out, okay, well, what's our immortality? Okay, they're gonna put our mind, so-called, into a computer. Hey, you can live forever. You can be eternal. We'll just put you in a computer, and we'll, in a robot, and you can run around sounding like yourself. And that's the promise. That's the only promise they have. This transhumanism, but it's important. And the dark side, it's all about control, right? And so that's getting worse and worse as consciousness rises, because they're reacting against the consciousness. But what they really are stuck in is just pure ego, insecurity, have to control to keep control of most of the money in the world, and believe in this transhumanism and just keep it going because they can't let go. They're kind of stuck in that paradigm, and that's the dark side, and it's getting smaller, and the light side, in my view, is getting larger, even though it seems like it's just chaos out there.
And chaos seems to always, be inevitable. But and to that end, how far is this darkness going to go? Right. In other words, we have to go up to the edge of the cliff here and take a peek at the ultimate chaos before we step back and go, okay, that's the wrong path. Yep. But how much farther do we have to take this before everybody wakes up and goes, okay, well, all right, enough is enough?
Here's what you look at, in my view. It's what I look at. Who is seeking control without any guarantee of that the individual is paramount? In other words, who is seeking control in a way that that is a result of fear? Okay, all this is going wrong. If you don't let us control everything, it's going to fall apart. So that's their last-ditch effort. Who's trying to get us into wars and who's not? That's how you start to define who is against natural and organic healing as an alternative to the pharmaceutical control of the medical system, right? With all that goes with that, getting everybody on 4 or 5 drugs, no cures, but they'll tell us we can manage it. But it's control of the health system, control of education, control of all the things that should be helping people wake up. So the conscious people have to step back and say, okay, the world's turned upside down, who are the people that are trying to keep us free expression and free creativity and spirituality? Who is going to guard that against the people that want to throttle us down? I mean, social media right now is not just throttling down hate speech. They're throttling down anything that sounds spiritual or conscious, or if you talk about certain principles like love in the universe, that is not the materialistic paradigm that they're guarding. So, I'm not choosing sides or asking anybody to choose sides. I'm just saying, guard your free creativity and your spiritual path, because there are people that want to lock you into a pharmaceutical matrix. And whoever is slowing that down is who we should support.
It's really it's one of the points before we get to the break. One of the points that addresses exactly what you're saying. When our YouTube channel got shut down, I was sent. It took about a week, and we got it back. But they sent me a list of things that cannot be talked about on YouTube. All right. Now, some of them made perfect sense, and I get that. But there was other things, literally, James, herbs, right? Supplements. Any
alternatives.
Yes. Any alternative, anything, right? I could freely talk about any pharmaceutical prescription drug. No issues there, right? No issues. Anything else that went against the man, right? Yep. The money machine, they will shut you down without a warning.
Yeah, and they have the power to do that because both parties in Congress in the United States are controlled by these people totally, and so they're freedom fighters stuck here and there, but on both sides, right? But so we have to. And from my point of view, I mean, the people I support are the freedom fighters at this juncture in the the human chaos,
right?
Because it's a staying free, having free thought. You can if there's nobody that's been more liberal than I have. I support it all from a point when it was about emancipating everybody. But when it moves to, when the same people are now talking about controlling everybody because they don't like the talk, then, you have to step back and say, okay, the whole political world's upside down. And now we just have to fight in my view, I try to support the people that guard against the bureaucracy. And I'm not talking about government here so much as I'm talking about the corporate bureaucracy, because they want us to be divided into controlling economic regions, and they want us to have to to take the economic system that they want to create. But this is not utopia they're building. This is not the dreams of the baby boomers for one world in unity. This is a corporate fascist entity that is taking advantage of a lot of naive people to gain full control. And then it's a desperate last attempt. I'm not saying they're going to get away with it, because I really do not think they are. But there's an urgency to get to the light side, to get into the consciousness, because that's the only antidote. This is not a war we're having with these people. They're in fear. They think they're going to lose their advantages. And so the only way is to, move into consciousness, because consciousness is contagious. And, the individuals who are involved in this network of corporate craziness, they can be, they'll come over to our side because they look and they see us and they see something more free and more creative and more satisfying and more healthy and all the rest. And so it's a replacement. It's not a war we're having with them.
Speaking of corporate greed, I got to take a break here and run some commercials. Our guest tonight is James Redfield, and I knew it was going to be this great of a conversation, and we'll pick up everything when we come back after the break. All of the links for James are right there at jimmychurchradio.com. And I'm wondering where... Oh, here... Scared myself. I'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. You can subscribe to our podcast. It is just $2 per month. We have over 1,180 shows right there archived for you for just $2 a month. Go to the podcast banner over at jimmychurchradio.com. Our guest tonight is James Redfield, author, of course, of the Celestine Prophecy, going all the way up to the 12th. And the 12th, before we get to that, is the latest book. But you mentioned to me, can I mention what you mentioned to me?
Sure.
That
I knew you wouldn't tell anybody. So.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, right. And I didn't. I held back. But
Go ahead.
There is going to be a re-release of the Celestine Prophecy with an extensive addendum.
It's already here. I'm on the road with it now.
And
so it's out.
And where can everybody go and find it?
Well, it's interesting because you'll have to look around Amazon, because we've had several editions, but find the one that's the most recent edition. It has a blue cover, so it it'll stand out, and it has an afterward, so it'll let you know that there's an afterward waiting. And I've never done that, right? I've never added a long afterward, but I did on this edition because it's, I felt very strongly that with millennials coming online and their children, facing college, a lot of them, the older children of millennials, it needed to be put in perspective. And the book, of course, is about waking up, and that's really the title of the afterward.
Have you found your bliss?
I'm pretty blissful, I have to say. I really think there's ingredients to that bliss, and the most important one is meditating, and meditating in a way that, mindfulness meditation you can do a lot of different ways. You're just trying to calm the mind, right? I believe the most effective meditation is one where you are seeking to heal the heart. So you do it the same way, but you let go of not just the chatter in your brain that's mental, but the emotions that erupt because you have to let those go, and I really recommend a mantra where you really you're repeating to occupy your mind. You just and keep the chatter from allowing you to let go of the chatter. You intend to open your heart to a kind of primary emotion, and it's true across all religious traditions, all mystical adepts, and the key to, as you say, finding your bliss, but also finding your greatest creativity and your intuitive intelligence and all these experiences that come with a spiritual life. The key is opening your heart to a kind of state of love, essentially love. And I have people argue with me about this because they think love is too syrupy. Everybody talks about love, but they really don't show it and all that. But there is a genuine kind of heart opening that happens, and what you get is a kind of state of agape love. And if you intend that, you will get to that, and that's our primary emotion. And if you practice that long enough, then the other emotions, the lower emotions of anxiety and hurt from things other people have done, and anger, and all the things that knock us off our path, they can bounce off this solid core, and that's how you stay stable. And I know there's a lot of fear out there and anxiety and all the rest, but I believe that this is the fastest pathway into a kind of spiritual solution.
Can you get to that spiritual solution by accident? Right? Can you stumble into it without even knowing or practicing or reading about it?
Yeah, it's pure. It's just a gift from your soul. The peak experiences are, the research on peak experiences is, if you research that, you'll get the phone book, because all these spontaneous spiritual experiences happen spontaneously all over the place. A sunset can do it. The birth of your child can do it.
Right.
Just a helping hand from a stranger sometimes does it. But it's sort of across the board opening. In other words, and it's my message right now is that, hey, we're wired for this. And if as consciousness accelerates, and that's what's happening in my view, it's easier every day to do this. It's easier to meditate than it was before there was so much meditation happening remember, it's the group mind, right? And so all this meditation for every point of view that's happened over the last 15, 20 years is elevating general consciousness. So we can get into this consciousness easier now. I know it used to be hard to meditate, but it's easier now. It's hard. It used to be very hard to have a flow of synchronicity that kind of opens doors, just unbelievably for yourself. But there's key changes we have to make in our reaction pattern and how we live in order to really manifest that on a long-term basis. And I think getting our karma straight, is the most important part.
Once somebody gets behind the ball, James, and it's hard to catch up. They've messed up their karma. Now they're upset and because they're not achieving the things in life that they thought, and now they're getting a negative aura about them, and they're speaking in a negative. They're thinking negative thoughts, and they're behind the ball. Right? And then they wonder why life isn't working out for them. The gifts of life come to you once you start to achieve not only a spirituality, but a niceness, right? When you are kind, then you get those gifts. And they may even be material things that come your way, or a better job, or those things, because you are a kinder, nicer person to those around you, and you are seeking knowledge, right? Am I saying that correctly?
No, well, karma in this dimension, I believe, and anybody can prove this to themselves, I believe. I think it's a consensus now from the people who've studied karma. I mean, karma has been studied.
Right, right.
And the consensus, I believe, is that it's all around helping other people.
That's right.
Okay? And again, and that sounds a little bit like Sunday school, but it's about opening up, and through meditation you do this. You open up to your intuitive intelligence. So it will come to you how you can help somebody. So you don't have to say, okay, I'm going to shake this guy until they confess to me, and then I'm going to help them. You know, that's not the way it works.
Right.
You know, you are, have all your conversations every day, every week, every year. You know, you'll get, once you start seeking this, you'll get intuitions about how you can be of service to a person. And again, don't even think it like that. Think about how you can be a synchronicity, how you can say just the thing to that person that's exactly what they need to hear at that moment, right? We always want synchronicities, other people to give us those. But until we do it at least half time, where, when you're meeting strangers or just running into people, if you have to train yourself to ask, okay, what am I sensing about this person? How could I help them? And then what will come to you is to share something that has helped yourself in your life journey. And you blurt it out. You find a way to blurt it out. And so often what you get back is, that's exactly what I needed to hear right now. That really kind of lifts my spirits. I really appreciate it. That's what the world is designed for us all to do. If everybody was doing that, just half time, look for the messages that other people have, but also look in your heart for what, how could I be of help? So the karma is all around giving. If you're a giver, right, what happens is that more people, you draw more people into your life that are also givers, right? It reinforces the whole thing. It's designed to reinforce this way of life. And it's emerging, right? It's emerging. But if you're a taker, if you think first about how you can maybe manipulate this person,
take advantage, right? Yep.
Take advantage in any way, or mislead them, in some way that makes yourself sound smarter, or whatever the game is. If you're not being authentically giving, then you're taking, and a taker draws other takers into their lives. I mean, you can see it happen everywhere. If you're a taker, what comes around goes around. You got to get hit by another taker who takes advantage of you, slows your synchronicity down, throws you into emotional turmoil. And it's not for punishment. It's to show you how harmful what you're doing is to other people.
Right now, I'm taking from you, and you're making me look smarter. So there you go. And here's the point. I am not a saint, right? I am not. I've got my faults, James, and I'm trying every day. I'm fighting, to make those little baby steps of improving myself. But I find myself naturally just doing things. And I mention these from time to time on the air to suggest to others to try to do the same thing if you can. Because you just said it. If we did it, if we met halfway and this planet actually did, can you imagine? We would rotate on our axis. This planet would shift. It would be momentous. It really would.
You're stepping into a design that welcomes this shift, because it just magnifies your life. Another thing is giving money.
I give it all the time. You know what
the church has. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it was right before Christmas this year, and I'm in line at the store, and this lady in front of me, supermarket, and this lady in front of me is buying this tiny little wreath. It's tiny. It's maybe a foot, a small wreath, and the guy, whatever, she said, "How much is this?" This was all she was buying, James. And he said, "It's $19.95. She goes, I don't have enough money. I needed this for my daughter. I'm going over to her house for dinner, and I wanted to give this to her." And I was like, "Ma'am, take it." And she said, "What?" I said, "Just take the wreath and go to your daughter's house for dinner." She goes, "I don't understand," right? And she really didn't know what I was saying. I said, "Ma'am, Merry Christmas. Just take the wreath." And she said, "Thank you." And she walks out of the store. I paid for it. But behind me, the 20 people in line applauded. And the point to this, it's not the $20. It's certainly not that. But it was, now she is going to her daughter's house with a gift. Right?
That's right.
That little thing. It's nothing. Right? It's nothing. But that is what you need to do at that moment. For most at that moment, standing behind her, you let her walk away, and that's not right. That's not what this world is about, is it?
Well, it's you're missing an opportunity. You're synchronicity. If that synchronicity is real, where all this gets coordinated, if you step into the flow of it, then you're not, you cut off your own flow if you don't respond. Now, the church is always, I was going to say, the church is always has, kind of a, the corner on all the sides, right? Send it to the church, okay? But I believe that it's a universal principle, and what really helps, and this it's part of the transformation of anyone's life, and it helps if you're helping. In people, 10%, right? That's a lot. That's a trip, for people. But what what I believe that we can do is just start small, 1%, because there's something magical that happens because you got this money in your hand. Okay, I'm going to give this much away, and put it in your pocket, and you just wait, because what will happen is that a synchronicity will occur where you will have your intuitive intelligence will come in, and you'll get a hunch of what to do with that money. And it's, I've had people, I've had money, and wondering where I'm going to be led to give it, and I've had people drive up, in a big, old junker that's smoking and rattling, and come pull up right in front of me, and then blow up, right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And the person gets out, and they're, they don't know what they're going to do with the car and how to get it, And I say, okay, that's clear enough. Right? I'm supposed to help with that. So it doesn't have to be anything big. You have to be there at the right time. Nothing is more satisfying, and nothing is more evidential that this world, we're in a spiritual world that has a design around giving, and the more you give, the more you're given to, and you just have to prove that to yourself. All you cynical cynics out there, just think about it. It's not anybody, it's part of the spiritual universe that you're participating in, and it always comes back to you.
And there's another part of this that no matter how rough life gets for you and your family, no matter how bad it gets, there's somebody else out there that is really in a bad spot. No matter what, and you just think it can't get any worse. Well, yes, it can. And there's somebody out there that is looking at you in your rough spot and is saying, they have it all. Right? And it could be for so many different reasons. And that's why you should always look at everybody as being equal. And I really try to live my life that way. And I know it sounds like some Shambhala. Oh, that's one of your books. But the
way they act, though, that's the way they act there.
And how do we start to? And we'll talk about this after the break. But how do we initiate these changes in ourselves? I mean, what's the simplest way to make these steps forward?
Put a note on your bathroom window, mirror.
And what does that note say?
Whatever you're trying to remind yourself of first thing in the morning. And I really think the best way to do it is to get started right every day, so that you know what you're working on, and you begin to change your reaction patterns. Meditation, of course, again, is at the heart of it.
And as we head into the break, what I find interesting about that is it's a gradual. So many want instant gratification, right? They want to buy the Celestine Prophecy, and tomorrow they're a brand new person. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, does it? But after 6 months or a year, you can then look back at where you were 6 months prior or a year prior and go, hey, wow, okay, I have changed. And that's how it happens, isn't it?
Yeah. You're working on healing your heart, and then you're working on changing your reactions first thing in the morning. It takes some planning. In my view, the critical thing is to wake up in the morning and really wake up. Where am I in my life? Yeah, I know the kids are downstairs, and they're going to start screaming any moment. But where am I in my life? What are my questions? What problem do I want to solve first? And then you use intention, and that's a longer conversation. But intention goes up when consciousness goes up. And it's amazing how well it works at this point.
Let's take a break right here, and we'll continue this conversation when we come back. Our guest tonight, James Redfield. So happy. I'm so happy right now. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. More with James after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I want to remind everybody we're heading over to the United Kingdom. June 26th and 27th, 2020, we will be over at the Awakening Conference. I'll be hosting, and you can go to awakeningufo.com for tickets and information. But it's going to be great to finally head over to Europe and meet all of you. It's going to be wonderful. And James, okay, let's get to some specifics here. Fear. And fear has always, it's going back thousands of years, it's been used to control. And it's just part of the system today. And combined with that, more so than ever, we have the media and social media, but everything today, absolutely everything, is fear-driven, and which affects our emotions and our consciousness. And the man knows this, right? They know this, and it affects us. How do you watch television? How do you avoid this very, very tangible effort to control us with fear?
I tune into the highlights of the propaganda that's on television, and because I just want to know the sociology of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't, you can't let that vibe in, because it is. Did you hear something?
Yes, I did on your end.
Kind of. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on yet. Maybe my line, but let's go. If I drop off for some reason, I've been hearing like lightning strikes. I don't know if you heard any of those, right? Hey, y'all, we are getting some weirdness on the phone. So, if I drop off for any reason, will you just call me on my cell and we'll finish?
Absolutely.
Okay. So fear, it's as you say, it's a control mechanism. But yeah, it's going on now, right?
Yeah, continue. We still got you.
Okay. The point is meditation is the cure. Because it's everybody gets knocked into fear. It's an existential world. People have challenges. How soon you can get back into that love base of connection and spiritual connection. The mystics of every religion talk about a peace that surpasses all understanding, and that is a something that you tune into, you download, and it comes with meditating on your key emotion, and that's love, and building that stronger and stronger so you can get back, and the fear ceases to be debilitating. Because if you're fighting fear with some kind of coping device, whether it's drugs or lifestyle or whatever your choice is, it never erases the anxiety very long, so it comes back. Anger is another, anger is a way of fighting fear. But it's just as bad, So you're going to have emotional eruptions until you find your peace, and that is it happens over time, but it's never.
Oh, there you go. We lost James. And we heard this coming on, so I am going to... I have a choice here. Let me... Okay. All right. Let me figure this out. I'm going to do this live on the air. This is how I am going to do this. So just stay with me, everybody. And I will do this. Oh, man. Yeah, it was building up to that, wasn't it? And let's see here. I think I may have James back, but we have our ways of doing this. But it was building up to that point, and let's see how quick we are on the draw. This is going to be a lot of fun. And it's just like anything else with this program. When things like this happen, James, are you there?
I am, yeah. Oddly enough, it must be a landline problem.
It's so funny.
Down the way.
James, when you are ready to confront the man, the interference comes in.
Oh, you think we got dumped? AT&T dumped it.
Oh, man. That was interesting. I was watching Twitter, the comments from everybody. Okay, any second it's going to drop. And here he goes. James is going there. But it's
I'm back.
But it's really true. If you go back, and certainly with the basis of religion, and, you go back a few thousand years, the only way to control was by saying, God said, right? Get that fear going, and that modality, that method of operation has been instilled with leaders ever since, and they don't really have another way around it in their mind's eye.
That's right. I mean, they're operating out of fear, from their point of view, and listen, they invent crises, right? Because out of a crisis, people get fearful, and they're willing to, let some huge entity, if it's government, if it's corporate, manipulation, whatever it is, take over. You sort of let it slide because you're fearful, and they're generating the fear. So, the best way is to fight for your free expression, and when I say fight, that's a metaphor. Just hold an intention against that, to that it be surpassed by consciousness, and that's the only way to fix it, because the more desperate they get, the more controlling they get. And so everybody knows that, you see it at every level. And, a war, it's my view that you've got some CIA-driven programming going on now about UFOs, and it's not seeking the truth about this phenomenon. It's creating fear. These UFOs are dangerous. You could just see that movement creeping in. So the next scare is what? A war with UFOs? Is that what they're going to try? Who knows?
Well, you can see the writing on the wall with that. I mean, that is just right in front of us. When I didn't think that we would go into the UFO conversation, but I did find it interesting about a couple of years ago when UFOs suddenly were mainstream, and it was everywhere: CNN, Fox, BBC, Sky News, RT, and it continues through today. But once it started, I thought to myself, and I had this conversation on the air a lot, how long is it going to take before fear is part of this conversation now? It's not the phenomenon if we are alone in the universe. There's going to be the fear-based aspect of this. And sure enough, that is the secondary message now soon to be elevated front and center. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that is inevitable.
Yeah, and we just have to resist that because the story of UFOs is going to turn out to be much more diverse than that. So, and we're all doing our own research right now to try to figure that out.
And going back to, I wanted to ask you this earlier. When we are talking about consciousness, there are two ways to actually look at it, but certainly the first one is this. If you have a rock in your hand and you're looking at that rock, it's made of the same atoms that your body is. There are no other different atoms, right? It's the same atoms. But I am able to ask James Redfield questions and laugh or have humor or insight. The rock cannot. Where does the transition happen, from the assembly of atoms to suddenly the assembly of consciousness? And if it exists that way, it has to be everywhere in the universe, because atoms are the same in any galaxy as they are here in our Milky Way, right?
Right. Well, I think that the key to me is to think of consciousness as within, okay, and the rock at some level is part of our extended body, right? Because we were birthed on planet Earth, and the rocks come first, and what makes us think they don't have consciousness, right? So we're still open to all the facts, and that's different from feeling the consciousness. The consciousness is an experience of opening the mind, and I believe that the real experience is about opening our larger mind. In other words, if we're just in ego and trying to figure out everything and with the words that we put in our head, that's one thing. That's a kind of an ego matter. It helps us get things done in the world. But we're trying to let go to the larger mind that's quiet and feels, and with that comes the intuitive intelligence, and that's just that feels like a gift. I mean, once we meditate enough, what happens is that our quiet mind gets larger, right? And it's quiet, and what we get is these thoughts or images of things for us to do that we feel inspired about. That's why how to help. There's three people on the street, and you get an idea of talking to one of them, not the others. And so it's a thought or an image to do something, and that's our intuitive intelligence. And what happens is that intuitive intelligence, if we start in the morning, sort of surveying what's really up in our lives, what do we need solutions to, how do we get the career change we want done, how do we, what happens is that, we'll get a prompt, an intuitive prompt, and that can be a gut feeling, it can be a vision, it can be a thought, or it can be a feeling, a kind of urge is what it'll feel like. But it's to do something, to go do something, talk to somebody, go open up your computer and surf around and see what happens. You'll get an urge to do something, and then that will lead to a meaningful coincidence that comes that you think, oh wow, I was just thinking about changing careers, and I was, now I'm on the bus or on the subway, and the person behind me is talking about that exact career with their experiences of how they got into. It can be so specific, it just blows your mind.
And again, it's a helping universe, and we get help, but we have to quiet the mind and the emotions, and then we can get prompted to how to get our answers. Now, that's something that and I'm not going to say very few, but more and more every day, people are tuning into. So we're starting to use our intuitive intelligence, and that puts us in. That gives us direction. And sometimes we think that things will come to us, and we'll say, "Oh boy, I'm really smart." I just thought of what to do to solve my problem.
Right.
And it really is something that just came to mind. Right? It wasn't a mental process at all. It was some image or thought, and it kind of arrives. So it's that intuitive intelligence. It feels a little bit like guiding from our larger mind. That's a guidance that's coming from our larger mind. And that's, acting on those intuitions is how you keep the flow going. And that flow is the kind of miracle existence that I think we're ultimately going to step into in larger and larger groups of people, and that's going to solve everything.
You make it
and just in time,
right, but you also make it sound simple. There are those out there. I get it, but there are those out there that don't know when to have their eyes open. When it does happen, how to recognize it when these synchronicities appear in front of them or this intuition appears. How do you learn to do it and learn how to act on it when it does happen? That's the key, right?
Right. But you've got to slow down. We're in this reaction mode, and we have these emotional eruptions all over the place, and go into fear and anxiety and anger and all the rest, and that just makes us feel tortured. So it again, it's learning to sit with yourself is the key, and that's what millions of people are doing more and more every year, because it's so big, it's so much a solution to everything. But you have to learn to sit there, and come back to try to conjure up a kind of love in your solar plexus in order to kind of get past those emotional moments, and that chatter telling you that it's stupid to meditate. You better get out there and get on the ball and do something with your, all this chatter is trying to get us not to meditate, not to sit there silently. It's just, but more and more people understand, and will tell you it's worth it. Maybe you can't sit there 10 minutes, but make it 11 minutes tomorrow. Make it 12. Get where you could sit there 20 minutes a day at some point.
It's so funny how I try to reach out beyond this audience, because this audience gets it. They really do, right? I need to be speaking to those that don't get it. And something happened.
Listen, people tune into your show, they for the first time.
That's right.
The show's growing.
That's right.
And they're not like the rest of the crowd until they are. I mean, you say that, any of us have to do is talk out loud about it a little more. And
earlier today, let me share this with everybody before we get to the break. Let me give you the best example of how the universe is watching and listening. Earlier today, James and I were texting back and forth and emailing and answering our own questions in advance. And
well, you were answering. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And it was just,
I answered a question for you before you even asked me, and you did the same thing. So that's the coordination.
That is.
That's it.
And I want to just say to everybody, I actually texted James. I go, man, the universe is watching us right now, man. Because it was, because we knew what this is a conversation tonight about us and about consciousness. And here we are texting with our consciousness actually in a time machine, where it was happening in advance, in real time, and we were the example of this show tonight, James. It was funny. That was hilarious, man. That was hilarious.
So what happened was, you before you texted me, I saw a clear picture. I just stopped everything. In fact, I dumped a call because, whenever I get that big a hit, some person flashes across my mind in a memory or in a just spontaneously. I figured, okay, I'm going to run into that person or I'm going to hear from them. So I was just waiting for you to text, and there you are answering my question that I had about the show.
And for those out there that may drive around all day long thinking about material things and not wondering about the universe or contemplating the unknown, right? Or dreaming. And then a synchronicity happens, like you are suggesting. A thought pops in your head, a friend that you haven't talked to in 10 years, and the phone rings, and it's that person. There are those out there that don't make the connection at that moment. Right? They don't even wonder about the synchronicity that just happened.
Yeah. That's why, if you ever, and I've asked this question to an audience in 7 continents, okay? And what I say is, we get intuitive guidance, and we have to act on that as soon as possible. And an example is if you haven't thought of an old friend in months or years, and they pop in your mind, that's a guidance. That's an intuitive moment, and we have to act on those. So, and then I asked the audience, okay, how many people have experienced that? Everybody. And I said, when you call them right away, what did they say? 5 different languages. The audience says, the person says, I was just thinking of you. Okay? And so that's the payoff. The payoff of thinking of that person on both sides is it's time to talk. And then what happened if you consciously explore, okay, why are we talking? What's going on in your life? What's going on in my life? And then you come to the, it's conscious conversation, and you derive what it is, what are the messages that both people have for each other, and how does that extend, their lives and the flow of their lives. And so that's the end game, and that's all. Once you tune into that, then everything goes better. And if you're a giver, it goes faster and faster, and it goes easier and easier. I tell people all the time, we're protected because if we're open to our intuitive intelligence, we get premonitions. Premonitions are cautions about danger ahead. I've been saved countless times by a thought to go another way. And then I find out about a big wreck that happened on the old path.
Right.
That I would have taken. So it's the solution to this, this world that seems so chaotic. There's a synchronicity that can move our lives in just the right direction at the right time.
I'm going to ask you right now before we head to the break. We're going to have to go into overtime, James. I'm not ready to stop. I'm not ready to stop this conversation. And it is this, because everything is universal. E.T. arrives on this planet. E.T. actually arrives and sits and starts having conversations with us. They are going to have the same experiences with consciousness as we are. Right? There is an inevitability to all of that. It has to be the same everywhere, right?
That's right. And there's some level of developing that consciousness. So, are they ahead of us? Are they really behind? Who knows? I mean, but it's going to be a hell of a conversation.
It will be a hell of a conversation. And there's another part to this, and we can certainly finish when we come back after the break. But when we talk about entanglement, and I always go back to science because I'm waiting for science to just prove us right, and you and I can be vindicated and we can kind of laugh about it and enjoy the moment. But entanglement goes across the universe. That's it. That's part of Einstein, and that's the way that physics says it is. But if that entanglement is indeed a part of our reality, then communicating consciously across the vast distances of space and time is also real, right? That communication has to be not only on this planet through, like we were just saying, synchronicities, but it has to also go across the universe, right?
I think so. I mean, I think that's an absolute given, and it transcends time, right?
It has to.
I can't wait to go back and witness history happening. And we're capable of doing that.
Can we? Okay, you know what? Let's just take our break right here. Let's take our break right here. Excuse me, our guest tonight, James Redfield, and the question of overtime was inevitable. This was the universe working with us. We'll be right back after this short break. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. More with James Redfield when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, James Redfield, heading into some overtime, but you saw this coming. And James, the Inspiration Tour 2020, tell us about that. And I was Rita had just posted up Orange County, San Rafael, San Diego, Asheville, Boulder, Portland, Boise, and the next one coming up is in Sedona.
That's right, April the 11th. So what we're doing is these intensive workshops. I talk about all that we've discussed here in terms of how to step into this flow. I mean, to me, we figured it out. It's a matter of just doing it. But especially if you have something really that you're wanting to do, that you're wanting to create, and you want that to go well, and you want it to go with a flow to it. What we try to do is get to the essence of how we all are changing our reaction patterns. Okay, how we react to things that happen to us. Power struggles. You never have to defend yourself again. There's a way to disarm every power struggle. Some people like power struggles, but if you don't, and you want to be out of them forever, then there's a way to do that. We know how to do that, and it all begins with this opening and tuning in, learning to do it all the time, not just when you're in meditation, but eventually that becomes an open, intuitive intelligence and keeps you in that flow. And what you do in meditation is only the beginning. What you're trying to do is keep that open mind with, open to your larger intuitive intelligence going every day. So we start and systematically move through exactly what the steps are for that, and I believe it's something that people can do. I mean, you can go see Tony Robbins and you can get high as a kite, but when you get back home in your power struggle and your boss is screaming at you, do you know the steps back to the flow that then will serve you your creative side and what you really want to do in the world?
Is the easiest way for information is to go to CelestineVision.com, your website, click on events, and you'll have everything there?
Everything. And that's right. And you'll go somewhere to purchase tickets. You'll be taken to the place where you can actually, make sure you have a ticket to the event. We'll be doing, all year we'll be doing these things. Again, it's been a really interesting experience for me to, we started out talking about me staying behind the book.
Right.
Letting it circulate the globe many times. But now we've got these two generations that are a little bit different. And, millennials are different. And everybody who's older than a millennial knows that, they didn't engage right away because they're different from baby boomers. They are Xers even. They are about unifying the planet. So they don't want all this abstract. They want to take all this abstract theory that baby boomers generated about how to live life better, right? But they want to distill it down into something that they could do beginning first thing in the morning. And that's really what I think, because millennials and the children are already the majority population on the planet. And we're in the sense of, the group mind we're talking about, we're feeling that same way. We want to take all this our ideas about consciousness and bring it down to a core set of values, just like millennials want. They want to establish a new set of values out of all this abstraction, and that's exactly, I believe, what's happening, and that's why there's so much consciousness really growing with this generation.
Yeah, I think in one generation with the millennials, I genuinely think their DNA is different. Right? I really think something happened. It's
well, it is. I think it's every generation thinks that. Okay, so I believe that every generation alternates in a certain way. Like, for instance, baby boomers, who are, they're starting to retire now. They're starting, they're asking the larger questions again. What I really want to do when I grow up, right? And what's my legacy going to be? But baby boomers were searchers of abstract thinking. We had theories we're trying to pursue, and we're trying to live them and everything. But the fun was in the theory and hoping it'll last. I mean, hoping we can get to the bottom of stuff. And baby boomers, millennials then come next, and they are less abstract thinking. They don't want to do abstractions. What they want to do is unify all this abstract thought into a new value for the culture at large. And then the millennial children, they're more out there mentally. I mean, they're out there searching for answers more actively, and thinking of theoretical points of view. But so you can see how I believe that each generation alternates, so that you have a lot of discovery and then trying to bring it home to create new values for the planet. based on the best of those when the next generation comes around. So I think it's a normal process.
I do too, but the children of the millennials, right? My grandchildren are going to be born with cell phones, right? I mean, it's just like they have this ability to accept the information that is in front of them, disposable information, instantaneous. You and I didn't have that growing up, right? We had to go to the library. Now the library is in your hand. It's a brave new world. It's a brave new world. I couldn't agree with you more. I wanted to ask you this. You mentioned something to me over the weekend, and there are two different types of people in this world. There are those that do and those that don't, and I accept that, right? There's not really a whole lot of gray area in the middle. But you mentioned to me that you had a piece of property that you wanted to do something with for this planet. Can we expand on that a little bit, on what your ideas are?
Well, we already have a registered wildlife preserve and some property I have in Alabama, which is interesting to experience Alabama, coming back to it, right? But it's it's about 600 acres, and we just made it into a nature preserve. There's a lot of hunting still going on around but not on this property, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have, there are lots of wildlife. And our nearest neighbor on this property is 2 miles away,
right?
And forest, deep forest, and adjacent to us is another at least 49 square miles, really, of forest area, and so it's there's a lot of open land here. Don't tell anybody, right?
Right.
We want to keep it open, but there's open land that it's interesting in Alabama because it's so rural that people with small incomes, really, people make $30,000 a year can afford to have 5 acres, right?
Right.
That's not true in California, right?
No.
And
no.
it is here, and it's wooded, forested, and wildlife everywhere. We have small bears. We have occasional cougar. We have everything else, fox, and coyotes, and all kinds of small animals. We have the lake here has otters and delightful creatures, right? Delightful creatures, and they're conscious. And once we understand how conscious animals are, we will treat them a lot better because they're very conscious, very relational. They're becoming conscious with us, which is an interesting point of all this. To see that happen. But anyway, that's. It's established, and that's our part of to give back a little bit.
I think it's so cool, and I used to be so unconscious, man. I used to be so unconscious in that you don't understand sometimes what butterflies or bees or insects or cats and dogs or thing. You don't understand the connection back to Earth and what every little thing means, right? Trees and flowers and food and how that is connected back to insects and life and things. This planet established itself without us, right? It runs on its own. There's a balance here. We can't go and screw with that. We can't. The balance would tip so quick, wouldn't it? We could be gone as easy as we appeared if we don't take care of this planet.
Without a doubt. And we're kind of lost in some scare tactics that's going on, and we're not paying attention to what's really fouling the planet, and that's chemicals. The whole emphasis on climate change is de-emphasizing the actual polluters, that are polluting streams and polluting the oceans, and that's a place anybody can find a mission in, just exposing the corruption. That's the next. I mean, it's being exposed quite a bit, but just exposing it more, and doing our part to expose it, and discovering it. Go out there and be a whistleblower, and discover these acts of pollution that are happening out there, and it's a big calling, because exposing the corruption is the way to get past the corruption. First, we have to know what it really is, and who's doing it, and how they're getting away with it, and all those things, and that takes people, banding together and doing the research.
And there's one other thing that I've got to get to tonight, and I'm going to discuss it in just a second. But you and I are from a generation, and I don't want to make us sound like old dudes, but we're getting there. And it's this: when I was running around in the 60s through fields and summer vacations and things, there were bees everywhere, right? There were butterflies everywhere. There were birds everywhere. There was noise outside in nature. Today, I don't see any of that. It's like missing, James. And is this my imagination, or is this a different place than where we were at 50 years ago?
Well, I think it's where you are. I mean, how populous and how crowded is where you are. Because people just edge out nature.
Right.
When there's too many people in any one city, or too many people in any one state. So you often have to find it again. But I grew up the same way, and it's a population issue. But it's also just a location issue. It's resources. I mean, if we had, there's free energy available, we all, assume that, right? But, it could be implemented so, we could all have our place out in nature, and with free energy and communications and all the rest with that, that comes with that. But it's just cramming together because of the economics of the situation, basically, and resources, but that would change when we get our Star Trek reality, right?
Yeah. The question that I wanted to get to was one of diet.
Ah, yes.
Yes, diet. Right. And you know what? I'm just going to leave it right there and hand that over to you. That has to help us one way or another to have clear mind.
Right. Well, the dark side wants to depopulate, and they're doing lots of stuff to depopulate, and also to, in my view, dumb us down. Where we can't think. But some of it's greed and corruption, and sometimes it's done intentionally. They're raining chemtrails down on us, and And if anybody doubts that, all they have to do is look up in the sky every now and then. And there's vaccines. There's all this intention to kind of dumb us down and hurt our health. So if once you wake up to all that, you realize that the controllers want to decrease the population. I mean, it's everywhere. We know that's and they're doing it the way someone who doesn't believe in anything spiritual would do it. So that's another corruption that we have to expose. But there's things we can do to protect ourselves, and it's because we essentially have to separate from the corporate medical system. The drugs are not created to cure anything. Drugs are created to hook you on the drugs. So it's a maintenance issue that they want to create in every person. So the way that I handle that is that I've found an integrative physician, right? And I recommend that everybody finds an integrative physician. Now that's a legal physician who is moral enough to back away from pharmaceuticals, and who decides that there are a lot of measures you can take to stay healthy. And the basic ones is to make sure you're getting the nutrients you need. There's all the minerals that used to be in the soil are not in there anymore, even with much of the organic foods. They're just not there in the quantities that we have to have. So everybody is short of magnesium, for instance. I mean, it's a epidemic. D3, the sunshine vitamin. Everybody's been scared into putting sunscreen on every time they go outside, because with the idea that it's the sun causing skin cancer. Well, the sun doesn't cause skin cancer. It can, you don't want to get too much of it because it ages your face. But what causes skin cancer is sugar. And so, once you go to an integrative physician, you'll get the basics now of how we're all short of nutrients, and we're aging about twice as fast as we should be, or maybe even more. I will mention the Life Extension Foundation, and I have no financial deal with them. But I support them because they're scientists and physicians who are researching nutraceuticals, in other words, plant extracts that have a medicinal effect that help balance the body back out. So they have supplements. I'll give you an example. My father had high blood pressure, right? So a few years ago, I was going to my integral physician every year and got, and went in. He says, you got your blood pressure is creeping up. This is not healthy. What are you doing? And I said, nothing that I know of. I was trying to eat well, but it was happening. And so, I got on the website of Life Extension Foundation to see what nutraceuticals, the research they had about that, about high blood pressure. Well, it turns out that pomegranate extract and L-arginine is the cure, right? And if you've got a diet high in starches and lots of sugar, it's hard for it to work. But if you're willing to back off on those two essentially poisonous substances that we put in ourselves,
my two favorite things, right?
what you get, I have the blood pressure now just from those two nutraceuticals. I have the blood pressure of a 30-year-old, and it's because they work. And and I've cleaned up my diet a little bit more, but they work to do that. No medication was necessary. Okay, so that's something that every doctor should know about, right? But of course they don't, because all they know is what the pharmaceutical companies tell them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you have to find a integral physician and stay in touch with some organization like the Life Extension Foundation. The fact of the matter is, they're just through nutraceuticals, you can, and healthy living, you can age at least 20 years slower than the current generation. And it's retroactive. You can go back in age. They have a little, every, in our genetics, we have something called a telomere, which is nothing but a measure of how fast we're aging. And it gets, the worse we treat ourselves, the shorter they get until we die. And then when they go down to nothing, you die.
That's
Whether
right.
you get something or not, you just die. And so they now actually have a measure of how fast we're aging, right? So again, you can you clean up your diet. And what I mean by that, I just talk a minute about that, because diet is somewhat personal as to what works best for us. And there's another the internet doctor, Dr. Joe Mercola. And if you Google him, you'll see, how awful he is, all coming from the pharmaceutical industry. So that he's pretty good. And what he recommends is figure out what kind of metabolic type you are. Some people have to have animal protein to be healthy.
That's right.
It's a genetic thing.
Yep.
And you just have to figure out what you are. Now what he defines as you're either a plant type, a vegetarian type, or some degree of animal protein type, or mixed. And when you take his little test, it's just a real questionnaire about when you feel good and when you don't, and you can determine what the ratios ought to be. But the idea that we can all be vegetarians right now in some way to try to save the planet, it's just not workable, because a third of the people they don't do well without some animal protein. So I recommend just doing like the native peoples of the world do. They eat some meat and fish. You just have to do it by honoring these creatures and having a native people kind of ceremony around consuming animals. Now, will we evolve out of that? I think we probably will, and we might could do that pretty quickly. But as consciousness goes up, right? But the most people have at least 10 nutrients that are essential for good health that they're short in. And the only way to know is to go to an integrative physician and realize that the values are, the ordinary doctors give blood tests, but they say, oh, you're okay with all this, because the values they recommend and the pharmaceutical research recommends are way low. So we need a lot more D3, the sunshine vitamin, than your ordinary doctor will say. Magnesium, potassium. We need to keep our hormones. We need to test our DHEA, coenzyme Q10 levels, all that kind of, those are the things that that can buffer the fast aging that's going on our planet. It's going to be the dark ages of medicine. This will be known as the darkest age of medicine, this period that we're living through right now, to future cultures, in my view. The last thing I would recommend about that is get out of breath every other day. Okay? The exercise that we need is not running. That's the worst thing we can possibly do. Long-term running is the worst thing. The research shows that's the worst thing you can possibly do for your health. But what we do need is interval training, like do something lift weights or row or run, or sprint to get out of breath at least 30 seconds, up to 30 seconds, and then stop. But try to do so much you're out of breath in 30 seconds, and you do that, and then recuperate a minute, and then do it another time, and up to 8 times every other day, because that expands your lung capacity. And if we're not getting out of breath, and a lot of people are not out there, you're not expanding, you're not keeping your lung capacity up. So that what happens is that your lungs age way ahead of when they should. And again, that's all you can read. Anybody can read about all this on Life Extension Foundation platform, and the word is out. We know, I think, pretty much how we need to live in order to eat and consume in order to reduce this rate of aging that's going on.
Thank you so much for an amazing conversation tonight. And, of course, we did run out of time. And we did it. We actually did it. James, thank you so much. And on behalf of this community, thank you for everything over the years and continuing on this effort to help us all. And with that, I'm going to have to run straight to credits here, James. We are out of time.
Jimmy, thanks for what you do out there. Keep it up.
I look forward to our next conversation, James. Thank you so much.
Me too.
James Redfield. Now, it is CelestineVision.com is James's website. The links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. And do click on the events section there. He will be speaking in Sedona, Arizona on April 11th. All of his books are there. You can click on that too as well, and some great articles. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Camarion. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2020 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night's Fader Night, open lines all night long. Until then, I want everybody to be safe. Go Backley Tappy.